Hello and welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, James and I talk about gated opportunities. What does it mean? Who are we looking at when we think about that? And how can we identify and potentially try to remove some of the barriers for these high-profile opportunities that are hard to get into? We start with James's chagrin at finding out that a key point he'd planned to make has been preempted by the changing landscape of these gated opportunities and their application processes.
I have to say, I was coming into today's conversation hot.
I forgot about the hot part. Shit.
Hot.
Okay, hot. Yes.
Fired up.
Stay hot.
Ready to really tear into the two concepts that we've been talking about behind closed doors, not in front of the people who listen.
Not in front of the children, not in front of John in the basement, John Irving.
Right. The stuff we hide from John Irving because we don't want him to get overexcited down in the basement because it's really damp right now. And he's starting to smell funny.
I'll say, starting to. Come on.
But
yeah.
So I was ready to come in hot on the stench of privilege.
Yes.
Which we call stenchers. And I'm ready to go on that. I'm good to go on that. But we had this thing that we wanted to talk about that called gated opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we were talking about artist residencies, writer conferences, and how they use the inclusion exclusion criteria to really kind of put a gate around the opportunity so that only the people they want to come in, only these certain folks. And one of the ways that they do that is with references. The more famous, well-known, connected, networked your references, by extension, you are, the greater the likelihood you're going to get into that program, right? Yeah. So as part of my get fired up, ready to chew metal, I did some homework because I wanted to have quotes, right?
Perfect. Let's hear them.
Okay, so I went to Yaddo. Looked up their reference requirements because last fall, I looked up applying there, and they blatantly stated the more important a person your reference is, the more likely you're going to get in.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, they said the quiet part out loud, right?
Yeah.
So I go back because I wanted to nail that quote. I wanted to just up against the wall, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I read. As of August 2024, due to the Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions, pressure campaign on the Yaddo community, we no longer require references as part of our application process.
What?
As of August 2024. What is the month?
August.
What is the year?
It's 2024.
Holy shit, huh?
What? Okay, how much of this is true?
Well, everything except for the fact that they blame us.
You know what? What the fuck?
Yeah, now. So then I thought, okay, well, all right. So I strike Yaddo off the list, right?
Yeah.
So I go to the next big one. Actually, probably the big dog of the big dogs.
Which is?
MacDowell.
Yes.
MacDowell Colony, right?
Yeah.
And then I read this. Again, due to the pressure campaign of Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions, the MacDowell Admissions Department has temporarily suspended the reference letter requirement as part of the application process.
WTF?
Yeah. And they said one of the reasons is the letters pose a barrier to applying.
Are you serious now?
And they go on to say not all artists have access to referrers, and this lack of access disproportionately affects women and BIPOC artists.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Where's that? Where I'm looking at their website. So just to clarify for our listeners, we're
Yes.
talking about
Probably a good idea.
two of the big programs for artists in general, interdisciplinary. So they're big for writers. MacDowell and Yaddo are super well known for writers, and they're both have quite a history. But they're talking about several disciplines: film, video, literature, music, theater, visual arts, architecture.
Dance, you name it.
Mhm.
They do it.
Well, this is huge.
This is huge.
So the thing that we thought was a big deal has been changed. And that's changed at Hedgebrook too, which is a women's only artist residence,
Really?
which I believe focuses on writing, but they no longer require a reference letter as part of the application.
Yeah. Well, curious. Now, so I then did more research,
Okay,
and so there's two others that I looked at. And these are, cost a lot of money, blah blah blah. Headlands artist residencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they want are names and email addresses of 3 personal or professional references. Please note, we do not want letters of references.
So
Then
they want information. They want people.
right. They
Yeah.
want people, right? So it's same thing, nary a difference, say we want a reference.
Huh.
And then Anderson Ranch, another hoity-toity, 3 references, including contact information, who can attest to your ability to participate and work within the artistic community.
Yeah.
So it's not universal that everybody is abandoning this reference thing as part of their gating the opportunity.
Hey.
So my question to you is, how does this, you as an artist, as a creative, how does seeing this playing out make you feel?
I feel suspicious. I feel that there's something they're not telling us. I don't trust it, but that's just my nature. So let me really think about your question. How I feel good that they are removing these barriers, these obvious barriers, to people who are just not super connected in, the hierarchy of their art. So they say, because I looked at Yaddo and MacDowell, and they both say the application is assessed based on artistic excellence, like that's their criterion. So it's still subjective, of course, but removing that big piece, I'm just so interested in how that decision was made and who made it. Obviously, they're run by boards or something, and they've been discussing it. So I think it's a healthy move. I'm very curious about why it happened, but it seems like we're not the only ones who have been thinking that the game has been fixed for a long time in favor of people who have the time and the money to make the connections that are going to allow them into these particularly sort of high profile opportunities. And that's so great. So how do you feel?
Suspicious. Because and maybe this is just my general, thing that I need to get over, perhaps. But the fact of the matter is these places are elite, and that's their brand, right? Whether they're going to admit to it or not. MacDowell, Breadloaf, Yaddo, these are elite institutions where artists who either have broken through and are, leaders, considered leaders in their form,
Yeah.
have an advantage, or artists who are up and coming and have in some way exhibited that they have that potential,
Yeah.
are the ones who are going to have the edge in these applications, right? And
Uh-huh.
one of the things that I wonder is they get rid of the reference requirement, and does that then, whether they intend to or not, and again, I'm not necessarily saying that they're doing this intentionally, like, we're definitely trying to pull the ladder up behind us as quickly as we can, but does that then mean that it makes something that was undemocratic even more undemocratic, because it's your connection to the committee that's going to make that incredibly subjective decision of the merit of your art. And so the more connected you are to that smaller group of people, or the more known to that smaller group of people, or the more in your application that you demonstrate, you have these criteria or access to criteria to this very small committee that is going to make this ultimately very subjective decision, actually makes it less democratic, perhaps, and I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm searching for a problem here.
Um, I I don't know. I mean, we would have to really parse out the entire process, and like the requirements, the what goes in your application. Are they blind applications? Do you have your name on your stuff, on your artistic stuff?
I think you still have your name.
Okay.
I couldn't access the applications for all of them because the application period either it ended or I ran out of time or something like that. But
Yeah. So there's certain still built-in barriers. They don't have they can't accommodate special medical needs. You've got to be able to get yourself there and back. But that's democratic in that everybody has to be able to get themselves there and back, whether you have money or you don't have money. I mean, it still favors people with more money, but that's life in general. I guess what I'm wondering is, I don't think we can know whether there's having a connection to somebody who judges the applications. I would imagine that would not matter on the surface. They can't say we're going to have the best artists here and then say, but wait, Trump's nephew wants to go to Yaddo, so let's hope. Like, that would just ruin their brand. So
yeah,
I don't know how much of a real issue that is. I guess what I'm wondering is, over time, will the identity of the people who are being supported and encouraged by getting accepted into places like Yaddo and MacDowell, will the overall demographics of that group of artists change, or will it just be the same old, except you don't need to be connected to a reference. You need to be connected somehow to the network of people who have already succeeded on other levels. I don't know. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And the one thing that I think, one of the things that we want to say to the people who are listening to us, this whole concept of mid-level creative, trying to grow your career in multiple ways and how you define it and that kind of thing, is that we've already gotten above that threshold of skill.
Yeah.
Right. So our writing or our art or our dance or our music or whatever it is already above the threshold.
Yeah.
So we've met that requirement. So what is the next piece, right? What is the next thing that we need to have in our back pocket so that we can start accessing these gated opportunities? Because there's still a gate, right? You have to apply. Very small number of people get in compared to the people who apply. I think Breadloaf, which is principally writers,
Uh-huh.
their acceptance rate was 16%. So 84% don't get in.
Yeah.
So, there alone, that's a gated opportunity. But at least, if you do remove this requirement of references, I think it's a good move, and I think it's a step towards making it a little bit more democratic and a little bit less elitist. But I do worry, from my previous comment, that it then makes even smaller the group of people who you have to be connected to in order to kind of have that ability. Yeah, I'm probably going to get in, right?
Well,
A world where everybody's art is quality, you've already gotten over the threshold.
I don't know, because I'm just reading their slide room portal, which is closed to applications, as you said, because the deadline for this application cycle just happened at the beginning of August. So they say, most notably, this is one of the big changes to their application process. The initial stages of our application process are anonymous to our admissions committee, and there are no CV, resume, or reference requirements. So if the initial stage is anonymous, that means everybody that gets up that ladder past the initial stage has gotten there because of their work, not because of their name.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so. That's another gatekeeper quandary, right? So I don't have the answer. There's a black box that we don't have access to looking into. And I think as we go along in the podcast, trying to shed a little light into that black box process, what are the selection criteria? What are inclusion and exclusion criteria? Imagine if you're an artist who trends toward, an art movement of the 1920s, as compared to an artist who's trying to, be the artist of 2025, as opposed to what I mean, pressing forward. Is that the differentiator, right? Is that the thing that is probably important to know? To what effect when a member of one of the gatekeepers, right, who's going to forward some group of applicants for final decision, says, "Oh, I've heard of this person," or "I know this person," or "I love this person," or "they went to an art school where I went to, or know a professor," and those kinds of things. And then you get to the committee that's actually going to make the choice, and and that's a black box. I have no idea. That's my why I would say initially I'm suspicious is that they very well could have the best of intentions, but hopefully it becomes more democratic and more open, and you start to see a broader range of artists getting access to these things. I think of writers like Harry Crews and Chris Offutt, who came from pretty modest backgrounds and who write with that kind of a voice of very sort of hard scrabble, kind of storytelling and voice, who managed to succeed. And I wonder if they could succeed now. So I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, I'm just looking, I just Googled who's on the Yaddo admissions committee. And it doesn't give names, so we can't ask them, but it does change with every application cycle, and it's previous artists who've been to Yaddo. So I think, that says something. I don't know what yet. And the other thing I see on their website is that it down by the bottom, it says, collectively, Yaddo artists have won 82 Pulitzer Prizes, 34 MacArthur Fellowships, 71 National Book Awards, and a Nobel Prize in Literature. So this is on their website. It's on the first page. So what it makes me think is that they want to have prize-winning people come out of their program. So they're really going to be quite intent on supporting artists whose stuff is prize-worthy And these are all American prizes except for the Nobel. And so what does that mean exactly for if you're applying? And this is what the organization's kind of thing that they're proud of is, will it behoove you to look beyond the actual residency application and go, okay, well, if I was on a billboard with Yaddo, the billboard test, would we fit together? Or is my stuff not what they're trying to support? Is it not, because National Book Awards are awarded to particular types of books.
Right.
So it's like taking a long view. Would that help you actually curate your own application to include stuff that fits with their brand? If you want to call it their brand, the Yaddo's brand is to produce people who are going to win these big awards like the Pulitzer. I mean, it's not chump change to win these awards. You got to have a certain body of work. So maybe that's another way to look at these opportunities is that can give anybody who's listening a leg up is if you're really serious about wanting to be in Yaddo because, you want to work on your stuff, but it's got to be that one. It can't be an equally sort of similar thing where you just go somewhere and work on your stuff. It's not really about that. It's about the Yaddo after your name. Anytime you write your bio on something, oh yeah, I was at Yaddo, I was at this. Remember we were talking about Jenny Z, who wrote the novel Holding Pattern, and Jenny holds a degree from UC Berkeley and Johns Hopkins University and is the grateful recipient of fellowships from Breadloaf. Fellowships, these are funded. MacDowell, Yaddo, Kundaman, I don't know what that one is, Aspen Words, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, Log Haven, the Kenyon Review Writers Workshop, and other organizations. That's a long list of fellowships. So I think maybe if we really, if we are saying, yes, you have now a better opportunity to get into these places, we don't know for sure if that's true, but at least without the recommendation requirement, it seems to be, like one of the barriers has been lowered or removed, then maybe another way to jump that barrier, any future barriers that you can't see is to target your application to make you sound like you were going to be able to win a MacArthur Fellowship.
Or a Pulitzer or a Nobel, which brings it back to what are the things that you as a writer have control over and what are the things for an artist don't have control over. And we had this whole long conversation about goal setting.
Listen,
and this kind of right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. You've got to write something that's going to impress another group of people who you have no idea who they are, what they look like, their inclusion, exclusion criteria, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Competing against, and not only that, but huge people are campaigning. People are spending gobs and gobs and gobs of money to campaign for those awards, right? Yeah. This is not like the meritocracy that they're meant to be. And I had a conversation earlier this week with someone who's very connected to that world.
Yeah.
And the world of bestsellers. And I was saying, look, the criteria for ghostwriting now to get, the really good plum jobs is you have to have had a bestseller, whether it's New York Times, Wall Street Journal, what have you.
Yeah.
And she said, I know. And I said, and that's the one thing I really have no control over. I can write a great book proposal and I can get my clients, agents and publishers and all that kind of stuff. But what they do after that, I have no control over. I have no control over how the New York Times decides what's a bestseller and what isn't, because it's not like when a movie comes out and you have box office receipts from the weekend, right?
Yeah.
The way the New York Times and all these other places do it is there's a formula that they use that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
What this woman said, who's been part of this, is that a lot of times you'll see crappy books on these bestseller lists because those people have the money to spend, tens of thousands, if not more than $100,000 to launch campaigns to gain the New York Times and whatever it is bestseller list so that their book appears.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how am I, if I as a ghostwriter need to compete for good ghostwriting jobs, I need to have at least one bestseller in my back pocket, but I'm competing against people with resources that I have absolutely no access to. And, sending my books off with their authors who are going to make choices based on their needs and what their goals are, right?
Yeah.
Their goals aren't necessarily aligned to my wanting to be a bestseller, right?
Yeah.
And so that's that makes this a really tricky place to be.
Yeah. 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 So I think 100% right. I have heard that about the bestseller list that, if you've got resources, you can game sort of you can get yourself on that list. You just, I think a political person, one of their family members just bought a bunch of their own books. like millions of copies, and had it happen, in kind of like a deliberate way, and they made the list. Not to say their book was bad, but I never read it. But it's got nothing to do with the quality of the book. It's just how many units can you move? Well, you can move a lot more units if you've got access to a PR campaign and money, and you're willing to actually just go out and say, yeah, I need 100,000 people to buy my book right, in the next week, and you can make it happen. So, well, 100,000 is a little extreme. Nobody needs that.
I don't know. I wrote a book that things kind of blew up, which is more behind the scenes that I can get into because of, the people involved in one thing and another. But it was the leader of a very, very large organization that had probably, 5,000-6,000 member organizations that were part of it. And think about the employee base, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And their goal for distributing the book was to give away, I think it was initially 20,000 copies.
Holy smokes.
To their members. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that was going to be, please promote the book within your company. We want people to buy this book, right? And they were going to spend on, so when you go to the airport and you see those little news kiosks that have the places, well, apparently those places sell tons and tons and tons of books.
I believe it.
And placement there, they were going to spend, I think it was like $20,000 a month for that book to be placed in those kiosks.
Wow.
So this is what I mean. Like, I have no control over stuff because all of that blew up because, again, I can't really get into it, but it blew up. And so the book went nowhere. Right.
Oh, man.
But that's one way that, and they weren't doing this because they wanted to be a New York Times bestseller. They were doing it because they wanted the book to get out.
Yeah.
And so, so if you think about, say the New York Times bestseller is a weekly thing, in that week that book would have come out with that level of campaign.
Yeah.
When you think about anybody else who would be competing against us for any bestseller status, good luck.
Yeah.
A lot of resources.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So resources are going to impact everything. And we're talking specifically about the gated opportunities that give you time to write and potentially connect you to other people who are on the on the upswing themselves and can become your community that you swim in. Like we were kind of talking about the pond analogy a few weeks ago, where if, let's say, it's a Darwinian pond, are we guppies? Are we like the what part of the pond are you in? And do you want to be a different life form in the pond as far as, am I a fish or am I going to crawl out of the pond and walk on my own 2 feet? I want to be over where the people with the most movement in their careers are. And those are the people who are getting fellowships at the big big artist residencies, it's like being employed by the government. You have to fuck up pretty badly to screw up the opportunities that'll open up to you after you've been among artists working at a certain level in some of these really high-end, hard to get into residencies with a long history and a ton of prize winners that have come out of them. So I would say, my earlier suggestion that that if we're applying for these types of things, look at what the residency sees themselves as leading to. Yaddo's case, it's these big prizes that we have no control over. We might as well just have a delusional ambition, category in the residency application and say, well, what do you plan after this? Oh, I'm going to win a Nobel. I'm going to get that call from Oslo.
So that's awesome. So we're going to put a pressure campaign on Yaddo, MacDowell, et cetera, that you got to have a delusional goal section.
Just put it out there.
So that people can say, I am going to be the Nobel laureate by, like, doesn't even correspond to when they announce the prizes, but
yeah. Let's just get it out there, because we don't know what the machinery is. Like you say, it's a black box. I'm quite surprised that they've removed the reference thing. I feel like something big must have happened to have that go across the board at these famous ones.
Yeah. And there's all these things that I wonder about, and again, future podcast episodes, we can dig deeper into this and we can bring people in. And, I think we want to tell listeners that part of what we plan to do is very soon start bringing other voices into this.
Yeah.
Make some interviews going and get a deeper, richer conversation working. Yeah.
We've got more to talk about next time on the gated opportunities and how to get your way into some of these high-profile ones that could potentially change your career. Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email to giftedunderachievers@substack.com. Until next time, have a great week.